Welcome to my channel, BlackRoom Truecrime. Today we're going to talk about a horrifying case that happened in the summer of 2013. The peaceful community of Hartford, Wisconsin, was deeply shaken when 19-year-old Jessie Blodgett was found dead. Now, everyone is afraid that there's a murderer among them, but it's the incredible bravery of another woman that ultimately leads the police to her killer. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, and enjoy watching. Jessie Blodgett's childhood and adolescence. In the spring of 1994, in Atlanta, Georgia, a charming baby girl named Jessie was born to parents Buck and Joy Blodgett. As time went on, the family moved to the small, picturesque town of Hartford in Washington County, Wisconsin, where Jessie grew up and graduated from Hartford Union High School in 2012. Jessie was gifted from an early age. Her abilities first became apparent in first grade when the teacher handed out lists of words that the children needed to learn and pronounce correctly. Jessie managed to do this so proficiently that her teachers had to create customized lists with more complex words for her, while her classmates were learning simpler ones. At a young age, she began learning piano and became obsessed with singing, dancing, and acting. Jessie had a happy childhood. She believed that everyone loved her and the world was hers. As a result, she loved everyone in return. However, during her teenage years, her eyes were open to the darkness that also existed in the world. Even at a young age, she was outraged by bullying and injustice. She developed a strong social conscience and a personal philosophy, proudly and stubbornly standing up for her beliefs. She became a fierce advocate for animal rights, environmental sustainability, social justice, and ultimately, ending violence against women. Jessie went through life with a passionate love for music, singing, and theater arts. Playing piano and writing her own music and songs were everything to her. Her friend Jacqueline recalled that every time she visited Jessie's house, Jessie would be playing the piano. Even when Jacqueline tried to talk to her, Jessie was playing, seeking every opportunity to create. Talented and driven, Jessie surrounded herself with like-minded people, all of whom were involved in music and dance. One of them, Daniel Bartelt, became her closest friend. Jessie and Dan met in their first year of high school, and since then, they always sat next to each other. Like Jessie, he was incredibly gifted both academically and musically, playing the violin and performing in theater. He, like Jessie, had been known as a fun-loving person since childhood. Naturally, when they grew older, they started dating. They had everything in common. They were like one soul in two different bodies, obsessed with the same things. However, after 4 months of dating, Dan decided that they just liked each other and it wasn't love. So they broke up but continued to be best friends until the end of high school. Afterward, both went to college, but Dan enrolled in a school out of state and moved away, while Jessie went to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. They continued to stay in touch but weren't as close. Initially, Jessie's father wanted her to pursue a more practical profession and leave music as a hobby, but she managed to convince her parents to let her be a musician. While she was a student, Jessie received the Talent Scholarship for her achievements in the music education program. During this time, she quit her job as a waitress and decided to start her own small business teaching piano and violin, as well as giving voice lessons. Within just 2 months, she had 26 students. In fact, Jessie had a goal of becoming a choral director in a high school or university, impacting the lives of 100 young people a year for 40 years, using music to influence people, thereby changing the world for the better. She took this goal seriously. Jessie also worked part-time at a local church, mentoring children from disadvantaged families. Jessie's last summer. In the summer of 2013, Jessie's old friends from out-of-state colleges started returning to Wisconsin for the summer break, and one of these friends was Dan Bartelt. He said he dropped out of college because it wasn't for him and that things weren't working out, so he was back in Wisconsin for good. From that moment, Dan and Jessie's friendship fully blossomed and became what it had been when they were in school. They were inseparable again, spending that summer playing music together, writing music together, singing together, and even playing lead roles in 2 productions. Dan in Bye Bye Birdie, and Jessie as the Fiddler in Fiddler on the Roof. The premiere of Fiddler on the Roof took place on July 14, 2013, and, of course, she delivered an amazing performance. It was the opening Sunday show, and the theater was packed. That evening was the first cast party, and Jessie appeared happy at the party. However, it was later revealed that she was actually very uncomfortable. Around 1 a.m., Jessie came home. Her mom was still awake, and Jessie told her that there were 2 older men at the party who were flirting with her and making her feel awkward, with one even attempting to get her to sit on his lap. After discussing it, mother and daughter went to bed, but before turning in, Jessie wrote in her journal, "I think I'm being corrupted. I think some men take what's supposed to be platonic love and turn it into a competition." She also wrote, "I'm not helpless. I recognize problems and confront them without fear. God be with me." The next morning, around 8 a.m., Jessie's mom, Joy, left some laundry in her room and then went to work. Her father was already at work by that time. About 4 hours later, around noon, Joy returned home for a lunch break, but the house seemed strangely quiet. No piano playing, no singing, which was unusual, but she thought Jessie might be tired from the party. After all, it was summer break. Most teenagers sleep in, but it was already noon, and her mom decided to wake her up. She called out for Jessie to get up, but there was no response from her room. Joy grew frustrated that Jessie wasn't answering her and couldn't understand why she was ignoring her. She entered Jessie's room and touched her. Jessie was cold. Joy panicked and called 911, telling the operator that her daughter wasn't breathing. She was soaking wet, and she had signs of strangulation.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Hartford 901, what's your emergency?
My daughter is blue. I went to wake her up, and I just got home from lunch, and she won't wake up.
She's
oh
19.
My God.
Okay, hang on just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so is she breathing?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, ma'am, do you know how to do CPR?
Jessie.
Do you know how to do CPR, ma'am?
She's cold. She's cold.
She's cold.
She's cold. Oh my God. Oh my God. She's good.
Okay.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Her pants are all wet, and she's got, it looks like strangulation marks.
There are strangulation marks?
That's what it looks like. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Honey, what happened to you? No. No. Honey, no. No.
The paramedics who arrived declared her dead. Jessie Blodgett was only 19 years old. The police who arrived on the scene immediately knew it would be investigated as a homicide, so they restricted access to the room for outsiders, specifically for her father and mother. Hartford Police Detective Richard Tickens was one of the first investigators to arrive at the scene that day. He found a very noticeable rope mark on the girl's neck and very faint marks on her wrists and ankles, possibly from being bound. Jessie's hair and clothing were wet, suggesting that the killer had washed her, placed her back in bed, and covered her. It was likely an attempt to remove any evidence from her body. The police found no signs of forced entry, indicating that the victim likely knew her killer. Jessie's mother told police about the conversation she'd had with her daughter the previous night regarding 2 men at the party who had behaved inappropriately toward Jessie. Later, it was revealed that one of these men hadn't shown up for work on Monday, raising further suspicion. He was found and detained. He wasn't hiding. He cooperated with the investigation, and after several hours of interviews, he was released. The investigators were unable to find any evidence linking him to the crime scene, and cell phone records showed he wasn't at Jessie's house. They also found and interrogated the second man, who was also released. Both of them were innocent. Attack on a woman in the park. While the Hartford police were interrogating Jessie's family and friends, the authorities in the neighboring town of Richfield were searching for a man who had attacked a woman in a park. This incident happened 3 days before Jessie Blodgett's murder. A young woman named Melissa Etzler was walking her dog in a local park in the morning and was just about to leave when she was startled by the sound of footsteps behind her. Melissa turned around and said to the stranger, "Oh, you scared me," and then turned away, but soon heard rapid footsteps approaching. She looked back and saw a knife in the man's hand. The next thing she remembered was lying on the ground, face down, with him on top of her. Melissa had the knife blade in her hand and was trying to wrest it away from the attacker. After a brief struggle, the man realized she wouldn't give up, and he surrendered, allowing Melissa to snatch the knife from him. After that, he asked if he could just leave, but simultaneously tried to take the knife back. So Melissa told him, "Go, but I'm keeping the knife." He ran away. Washington County Sheriff's Detective Joel Clausing spoke with Melissa in the hospital soon after the attack. Her emotions were still as raw as her injuries from the struggle with the attacker, but she composed herself and explained what happened, adding that she kept the knife and that it was in her car. It was a fish filleting knife. She also mentioned that she remembered every detail about the attacker. He was a white male, between 18 and 20 years old, approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall, about 210 pounds, with light blonde hair and very fair skin. He was wearing plaid shorts. She also described where he was parked in the lot and the type of vehicle he drove away in. It was a dark blue minivan, a Dodge Caravan, from an older series. The police circulated an almost perfect description of the suspect's van, thanks to Melissa's observation, and something noteworthy happened. The detailed description of the van seemed familiar to a sheriff's deputy who regularly patrolled the park and had noticed a similar vehicle in the parking lot several weeks before the attack. At that time, the deputy had checked the license plates on the car. Finding nothing suspicious, he drove off, but upon hearing about the attack, he returned to his notes and found the license plate number. When the police checked the license plate, it led them to a married couple who looked nothing like the sketch created for Melissa's description. When the investigators questioned the couple, they discovered they had a son who often used the car. He was 20 years old, approximately 6 feet 1 inch, weighing about 200 pounds. The parents gave the investigator their son's phone number. Joel Clausing dialed the number. The wake for Jessie Blodgett and the interrogation of Daniel Bartelt. Meanwhile, in the town of Hartford, a wake was being held at the Blodgett family home. Jessie's parents and friends sat in a circle in the living room, sharing memories, crying together, and hugging. Among the mourners was Jessie's closest friend, Daniel Bartelt. He did most of the talking that day, constantly chatting. Suddenly, his phone rang. On the other end was Detective Clausing. Daniel Bartelt was the son of that couple, the driver of the van. The detective said he needed to talk with him, and Daniel replied, "Okay." Then Joel asked where he was, and he said he was at Jessie's wake and would be right over. By that time, all the police in the area knew who Jessie Blodgett was. After hanging up, Detective Joel looked at his partner and remarked, "How many people get a call from a detective asking to meet, and they don't say, 'What's this about? Why do I need to meet with you? Why should I come to the station?'" But he didn't even ask what it was about. Meanwhile, Dan, after hanging up, looked at everyone and mentioned that he was called to the police station. Of course, at that point, no one knew about the attack on Melissa Etzler. Jessie's mom even told him not to worry. They were just planning to talk with all of Jessie's friends. The detectives began their interrogation, and soon Daniel shared something interesting.
Do you know what this is about? No. This is about an incident that Detective Walsh and our investigating happened last Friday.
Okay.
Where were you at again?
House in Hartford, Jessie Blodgett's house.
The girl that just passed?
Yeah, we were visiting her. Visiting her. I think so.
Okay. Were you at a park last night?
No,
Any park?
I don't believe so.
What do you have in your arm?
Where?
On your elbow?
Well, probably.
You see your hands? Go like this.
That's what I'm telling.
Got stabbed with a screw at work.
You checked with your employer, would you still have your job?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
By then, the detectives already knew that Dan actually didn't have a job. Every day, he would get up, put on work clothes, pack a lunch, and get into his parents' minivan, pretending to go to work, but he would just drive out of town to random places and parks, just walking and sitting around. The detectives told him they knew he wasn't working. Eventually, he admitted that he was the one who attacked Melissa in the park. He told the detectives that ever since he dropped out of college, he was afraid of life and just wanted someone else to feel the same way. Now, they had a confession and some emotional context, but to back it up, the police needed evidence. They went to the park and collected all the trash from every bin installed there. In one of them, they found several items with Bartelt's blood on them. They also found a roll of tape that he was probably going to use to seal her mouth or maybe wrap around her wrist, ankle, or something similar. Later, during a search of Dan's house, they found identical tape wrapped around some pipes. During the identification lineup, Melissa unhesitatingly pointed to Dan. He was arrested and held in custody pending trial. The unexpected twist. Meanwhile, one of the officers who interrogated him that day recalled something else Dan had mentioned during questioning. He said that Jessie had been raped and killed. The critical part was that the autopsy report wasn't yet ready, and the police themselves did not know that Jessie had been raped. The only person who could know that was the killer. So while Dan Bartelt was in jail for attacking a woman in the park, the detectives handling that case shared what they knew with the detectives investigating Jessie's murder. An arrest warrant was quickly issued to search his home. Inside his computer, there was a lot of pornography and various grim things, along with search history containing terms like serial killers and compulsive killers. The most chilling find was a video in which the scenes completely mirrored what had happened in Jessie's room: binding, strangulation, and washing of the body. Now, the detectives decided to question him specifically about Jessie's murder. But this time, Dan was much more cautious. Bartelt acknowledged that he had reconnected with his ex-girlfriend that summer and had often visited Jessie's home a few weeks before her murder. He even claimed that he had a romantic relationship with Jessie but kept it quiet because he was seeing someone else. For most of the interrogation, he pretended to cry, but no tears fell. Dan claimed that he had an alibi for the day of Jessie's murder. He said he left home as usual, pretending to go to work, but actually visited a couple of different parks, eventually arriving at Woodlawn Union Park around 10 a.m. When asked what he did there, Dan replied that he read and tried to write. Then, as the questioning progressed to the part about him trying to write, he told detectives that it was a series of stories about a young girl, similar to Jessie, who would eventually be murdered. As the detectives continued to press him, Dan Bartelt's tone suddenly became less tearful. He invoked his right to remain silent. He said that if they were going to continue the conversation, he would like to call his lawyer. That was the end of the interrogation. The detectives had to verify Dan's alibi, and yes, he was at the park that morning. Cameras recorded him. Based on this information, the police went to Woodlawn Union Park and decided to search all the trash bins. They found a cereal box containing paper towels, a gag, ropes, tape, and antiseptic wipes with red stains. DNA matching both Jessie and Daniel was found on the ropes, with one rope matching the strangulation marks on Jessie's neck and another matching the marks on her wrists and ankles. When the detectives searched Dan Bartelt's house, they found the same type of rope in his garage. Daniel's DNA was found under Jessie's fingernails. While searching Jessie's bedroom, they found tape under her bed. It was the same brand and type as the tape the police found in the park during the investigation of the attack on Melissa, and it was also the same tape found around pipes in Dan's house. It had Daniel's fingerprints. The police believed he had bound Jessie, gagged her with a gag, and sealed it with tape. The autopsy results were ready, proving that Jessie had been assaulted. Now, the detectives had the evidence they needed. The police believed that Daniel was a sociopath who had committed this heinous crime to satisfy his dark desires. They thought he chose Jessie because he knew she would be alone at home that day. After this news, it was hard for her parents and friends to deny that Daniel Bartelt, whom they thought they knew so well, was someone entirely different. Swift trial and sentencing. The trial did not last long. Although Dan denied all charges against him, he was still convicted of first-degree murder and found guilty. Daniel Bartelt was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He did not apologize to the parents. Dan tried to appeal his sentence in 2017, arguing that the police did not adequately explain his rights to him, but his appeal was, of course, denied. He is still serving his life sentence. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.